Morning, everyone, and welcome to the next episode of our Careers podcast. We're taking a slightly different approach with today's podcast. I'm going to introduce you all to Lewis Keighley. Hi, Lewis.
Hi, good morning, everybody.
So, Lewis is from our recruitment team. Do you want to give a little bit of an introduction on who you are and what your role is within the recruitment team?
Yeah, of course I will, Grace. Thank you for the intro. So
Thank
my
you.
name's Lewis. I've been working here at Bupa on the recruitment team for about 14 years now, so quite a long time.
Yeah.
I actually started off just on a temporary contract, just taking general phone calls and just sort of helping out generally as well. And I just stayed around for all that time really, and managed to build a bit of a career on it as well.
Yeah.
So I'm here to just talk a little bit about what help I can be for people.
Excellent. So, as I said at the beginning, we're going to take a slightly different slant on today's session. So, we might come back to you at some point, Lewis, and ask you to talk us through your role and kind of your career
Okay,
history and stuff like we've done with the other
sure.
podcasts. But for today's podcast, what I wanted to focus on, and thank you for your time and giving that to us, is to kind of use your knowledge and expertise and experience in working in recruitment to maybe give us some insight into how we can best approach a recruitment opportunity. So I know
Yeah,
that things that will put people off might be, having a CV and needing to update it and wanting it to be the best version of a CV that it can be, but not necessarily knowing where to start with that or what
yeah.
to
Where to
include and
begin?
that kind of exactly, yeah. Um, if they've ticked that one off, but then they get to the point where they're drafting their application, like what skills and experience, what kind of things
Yeah,
should people be highlighting when they're drafting their application? And then also
yeah.
if they've got through both of those stages and they're lucky enough to get to interview stage, then
hmm
maybe how best to prepare for an
Yeah,
interview and maybe what types of questions might get asked during an interview. And I
yeah. No
think you would
problem.
be brilliant at giving us some insights into maybe what a recruiter or a hiring manager might be
Yeah,
looking for when we go through
yeah.
these things.
Definitely do my best for sure.
Thank you.
So if I just start at the top then, maybe about the CV,
Yeah.
and I do understand that if you've not had to put together a CV maybe for a long time, it can be a
Hmm.
little bit daunting depending on the scenario that people are in. Just a few pointers from myself,
Yeah.
really. I think the first thing to think about is don't make it long. It
Hmm.
literally needs to be quite to the point.
Yeah.
I would say one page of a Word document, maybe
Yeah.
just going into two at the most.
Hmm.
Okay. Um, I would say, of course, make it look really professional.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is try to avoid putting too much graphics in there. We
Yeah.
don't want to see a lot of bump around that. It's mainly the text that you're using.
Yeah. So there's loads of templates online and stuff, isn't there?
Yes,
So
there
would
is.
you, and some of them are quite basic and some of them are really fancy.
Yeah.
Do the fancier ones kind of detract
I
from the content for you or?
I think it could do. Now,
Yeah.
if you were maybe applying for a role, say, for example, if it was a graphic designer or
Hmm.
something that is looking for a bit of a wow factor in that you can show that you can actually do lots of clever things on
Yeah.
Word or Excel or whatever format you're using, then I think that would probably, it's tailoring the CV to
Yeah.
what you actually want to get. I would say the majority of the time, it would be the slightly more basic, more professional stuff, because you are right. Sometimes lots of colors and graphics can
Hmm.
sometimes detract a little bit from the actual content that's in
Yeah. Cool.
there. I would say make sure that you've got personal information on there. So we do need your name on there. Um,
Yep.
Make sure that you've got the correct phone number,
Yep.
contact phone number, because if a recruiter wants to get in touch with you, if the phone number's not on there,
Yep.
not a great amount we can do really.
Yep.
Email address as well. And again, what I would and again, I'm just drawing on my own experience
Hmm.
here, is just make sure that that email address is working and everything,
Yep.
making sure that you can, get to messages quite quickly.
Yep.
Just be a little bit sensitive as well about what email address you're using in your
Hmm.
personal life. You might use one that's got, your nickname in there,
Yep.
or has got a
Yep.
little heading that's, a little bit saucy or something
Yep.
like that, shall we say. Make sure you're creating one that's quite professional,
Yes.
because that'll give a good impression.
Yeah.
Um, One thing to mention as well is I get a few times that people will ask about whether or not they should put an actual address on there, as in a postal address.
Mhm.
I would personally say to avoid using that, because there's a thing that we sometimes get when sharing CVs with an unconscious bias, and we want to try and eliminate things like that. So
Yeah.
I would say contact name, phone number, email
Mhm.
address at the top.
Yeah. Excellent.
I would say then when you're going into a very brief synopsis about yourself would be quite nice as well.
Yeah.
Just a little bit, literally 2 sentences, not
Mhm.
long. Maybe just a bit of an introduction to yourself, really,
Yeah.
and trying to tailor that a little bit to the actual job role.
Yeah.
So it could be, for example, you're going for a sales role, so you might want to say, I'm really target driven, I'm really
Yeah.
motivated, high pressure, you enjoy that sort of environment, for example. That could be it as well.
Yeah. And then in that section, would you
Yes.
keep that work related, so a work related kind of mini bio, or would
Mm,
it be like a personal mini bio?
I would say more professional,
Yeah.
really. And
Okay.
again, I do get a lot of CVs where people tend to tell me about their hobbies and what they
Mhm.
do on a weekend. Is that relevant for a job? I would say probably not so
Yeah.
much, to be
Okay.
honest with you.
Yeah.
It does give us a little brief insight into what your personality is, I
Yeah.
suppose. But I would personally say just keep that a bit more professional.
Yeah. Cool.
And then you're thinking about your work history is probably the next thing to look at doing.
Mhm.
I would always say start at your most recent first.
Yep.
So put who you've worked for, the
Mhm.
job title, um, the dates of when you've worked there would be really helpful as well,
Yep.
actually. I'm not talking about specific dates, but maybe, January 2000 to
Yes.
whatever it
Yeah.
might be. Um, and then the most recent one, I would say take a lot of time describing that job role that you've done. So
Yeah.
just outlining all of your responsibilities, all of your key skills that are
Mhm.
required for that, all the experience that you've gained in that job role.
Yeah.
Take a lot of time thinking about that, tailoring it sometimes again to the type of job role that you're actually applying
Yeah.
for. And then with any further work history, I would say that that could be quite brief, because again,
Mhm.
if you go into a lot of detail,
Yep.
if you've worked for many, many years, that's going to make your CV too long
Yep.
and people won't really read
Yeah.
past the most recent one.
Mhm.
And maybe a reason why you're wanting to leave that particular employer as well. It
Yeah.
could be that you're being made redundant, so you might
Mhm.
want to put in there what date you're available from. It might be that you're wanting to progress your career. Sometimes smaller companies don't have as much scope in career progression as a larger company like ours does.
Mhm. Yep. Cool. That all sounds good.
Yeah, I think that those for me are the main sort of
Yeah.
points. I don't know if you've got any other
Is there
thoughts or
anything that would put
questions.
put you off other than what you've mentioned in terms of a CV? So let's say like spelling and grammar. Would that be
Oh,
important?
yes, that's a really good point, and that is ultra important,
Yeah.
definitely. Attention to detail, accuracy. If there are spelling mistakes in there, then that would really put us off to
Mhm.
begin with straight away. Everybody can use a spell check, especially if you're using a Word document, for
Yep.
example. It only takes 2 minutes just to quickly go through and just to reread everything. That's a really good point, actually. So yeah, do be really careful about that.
Yeah. And what about references? So how many referees should people include on their CV?
I personally don't think that that really needs to be on a CV,
Okay.
to be
That
fair,
shows you how long ago it
because
is.
I know
That's
exactly,
fine.
yeah. And again, just speaking from my own personal experience and how we do things here, we would never ask for references before somebody's actually
Yeah.
interviewed and
Yeah, that makes
offered.
sense. Yeah.
It will come after an offer stage. Again, just to reiterate, I personally don't think it really needs to be on there.
Yeah. Cool. Excellent. Okay, well, if we maybe move on to
Mhm.
applications then.
Yeah, sure. Applications. Every company does it slightly different. So we
Mhm.
find a lot of time now. A lot of it is done with online assessments, or sometimes employers will send out online tools that you need to complete.
Yeah.
It could be psychometric tools.
Mhm.
It could be called simulations, or
Yeah.
simulation of the type of role that we'll do. That would, in theory, be an application as well.
Mhm. Okay.
Um, if you're applying for a job and it is asking you to list out some of the skills and maybe not on a CV, that's when you can go into a bit more detail. And again, just trying to think of an example, it could be that on the job description, it's asking you to be educated to a certain level or have a certain degree. It could be something that's in finance or IT. It could be something that's really specific. That's the point where you would be able to put those details on there.
Yeah.
I would avoid saying what sort of school or university you went to, but you can just outline those more specific skills, shall we say.
Yeah.
Another thing that came into my mind as well is if it's a regional job, you could be maybe traveling for your job. This is the point where maybe you just want to highlight that you do perhaps have a clean driver's license. And again, that's just being that bit more specific to the actual role you're applying for.
Yeah. And I've always been, previously been told that it's quite good to match what you're putting in your content for, I don't know, why would you be good for this role is sometimes, I guess, how it's listed. Marry up your experience with the job description that's listed, so the points that are listed within there and how you can show that you have that experience. Would that be a good way to do it?
I would say so. Yeah, definitely needs tailoring. So again, just thinking about if you're applying for a clinical role, for example, you might want to put that you've got the an up-to-date nursing pin and that sort of information might be in there. Again, if you're just applying for a sales job role, you might want to say that you are really target driven, you are really motivated for for sales and that sort of thing. If it's specifically about finance, then you might want to tell somebody about how good you are with numbers and with calculations and that sort of stuff as well.
Yeah, and measurable things, I guess, are good for that section as well. So rather than just saying you've done something, like give the measurable, how that's been measured. So you took a team and they were performing at this level and now they're performing at this level, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I think a small detail of that, because I think that those examples would come later on, probably in an interview stage, I would personally say. But you can just maybe put a very short, maybe, line in there about how you've had those experiences in real life.
Yeah. You mentioned obviously that we're taking different approaches to applications now. So there's stuff like psychometric testing and things.
Absolutely.
And I suppose that's probably like just writing an application is probably daunting for some people, but then having to potentially do something that you've never dreamed of before, you've never heard of before.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Could maybe add an extra layer on top of that. Are you aware of whether there's any, I don't know, sites out there on the internet or anything where you can kind of practice? I don't know if this is a thing, but like practice psychometric testing or anything like that, just so I guess someone would know what to expect, what that looks like, what it is.
Just to get your head around it first, isn't it? Any good recruiter will, when we send out a tool, and again, just speaking from our experience, there are practice levels that people can go on to just to get a bit of a feel of what sort of questions are going to be asked. And as a recruiter as well, we'll explain a little bit and we will help people, because you are right, it is daunting. It is all quite new-ish as well. Technology moves forward, we know that, and this is one of the tools that we are using a lot more of for people, and it does take away any sort of bias that a potential hiring manager might have, because then we can say, look, actually this are the results from what we've come out. This shows that potentially this person would be really good at the role. I would just say, any good recruiter would follow out with really good instructions. But there will be probably online examples that you can look at. You can kind of practice a little bit beforehand as well.
Yeah, cool. Excellent. Okay, should we move on to interview hints and tips then?
Yeah. So you've got through all those stages.
Probably the scariest part for most people, I would guess.
It may be, yeah. So, and again, we understand that you're having an interview. You've got a role that you really, really want to do. You're going to feel quite nervous. You're going to feel a little bit anxious. You're never going to know 100% what that manager is going to be asking you. However, you will have again, contact with a recruiter. You will have contact with somebody before your interview. They should be giving you really good bits of information where you can kind of prepare yourself. And you can be, if you are thinking about what you're wanting to give as examples, if it is a competency questions, then if you're prepared, that will take a little bit of the element of nerves away from you. But it's also a good thing as well. And you need to sort of take a deep breath before you join the meeting or you go into the office, however it's been done. And you can just sort of compose yourself a little bit. And the other thing that I always say to people is, remember, if you are a little bit nervous, that's not a negative thing. That could come across that you're really passionate about potentially working for this company or having this job role. That can actually sometimes come across as a bit more positive. You kind of need to make sure that they don't overtake what you're saying and things as well. So be prepared, but don't overly prepare yourself, as that could that could eliminate you not bringing forward your personality.
What's your view on like taking crib notes to an interview?
I've got a note of mentioning that, and I think that notes are absolutely fine. More and more interviews are done virtually now, so you're actually sometimes going to be doing them on a video call. You'll be at home, and automatically you might find that you feel a little bit more relaxed because you are at home, and you're able to have some notes and probably just hide them away from the video so that they're not distracting you too much. You want to make sure that you're not being too robotic, so maybe the notes, you're just glancing on them, just make sure that there's pinpoints on there, but you don't want them to be too much of a distraction.
Cool.
That's what I would say about the notes, really.
What about if you get asked, do you have any questions that you want to ask us? Is there anything that's I mean, I suppose dependent on what you're interviewing for, there might be some questions that would automatically pop in your head anyway. If you're maybe so nervous that your mind's gone blank, is there any like good questions that you can ask in an interview?
So it all depends. You are absolutely right, Grace, about how the interview goes, what sort of information has already been given to you by the recruiter and that hiring manager. So, for example, they might have already covered off any particular shift patterns or opening times, what it's like booking in holidays and other benefits that might be available to you for that particular role. Don't have to ask questions at the end. A good hiring manager will also at the end of it say, do you have any questions? I would say avoid saying things like, how have I done? Or, things like that, asking for immediate feedback, because sometimes that can be a little bit awkward. But just thinking about, what do you want to know about the team that you might join? What do you want to know about the specifics of the job role? And that might be where some notes would come in handy as well, because you might just then refer to your notes and say, oh, I wanted to ask about the shifts, but you've already covered that, thank you. You might say that I just wanted to check what size team I could be joining, how the is it hybrid working role as well, for example. So a lot of roles are now, how many days do you need to go into the office, how many days do you need to work from home? It's just sort of thinking about the different things that you might specifically need to know. It's a difficult one to answer that sometimes because of how the conversation might go, because they're all individual.
And I know that we quite heavily focus on competency based questions in our interviews, but there are other types of questions question styles, aren't there, out there? And I suppose this is probably, I'll take your opinion on that and how maybe best to prepare for non-competency based questions. But I suppose just from my own knowledge of looking myself, there's loads of information on Google for the different types of interview questions that you might get asked. But what are the other types of questions that potentially could get thrown at you in that situation?
No, that makes absolutely sense. And you're right, there is a plethora of stuff out there. So if you are researching online, it can, again, be a little bit daunting. We keep using that word, don't we? But it's true. The recruiter or whoever you deal with initially should tell you the style of questions that it is going to be. Your competency-based, your examples. The other main one that we would use, and a lot of places will use, will be situational questions. So that could sometimes be in the form of a role play or a scenario based interaction, and that will be you answering questions on how you would deal with a made up scenario if it came to play. So those are the two main ones I would say, competency based or situational based. And you should, in your preparation, be given sort of information of what they may entail, so you can tailor that as well. And a lot of larger companies will have values that they adhere to when they're doing their general work, and that will sometimes be reflected on the type of questions that they'll ask as well. Again, doing your research about the company, that's what that comes into play there.
Yes. And then I suppose lastly then, I would probably want your opinion kind of on appearance. So
yes,
some interviews will be face to face, some will be remote. How do I want to say this question?
How do you dress?
What is the best?
The dress code?
What is the best way to dress? I suppose. I suppose it's quite easier if you're doing it remotely. Really, only your top half, I'm guessing, needs to be smart. But are we still approaching interviews that we should be business dress, smart, that kind of thing?
I would say so. I would say treat an interview as a formal meeting.
Yeah.
And I would say, you're absolutely right as well. So sometimes, it is just the top part of you that shows. So just make sure that you've got a really, nice looking, clean shirt, blouse, whatever it may be. If you are going on site to meet people in person, be suited and booted, because that impression, it's a first impression that you get of people, isn't it? And if you look professional, I always feel as well that if I dress professional, I'm actually going to act a little bit more professional, and that's actually going to come across in when you're speaking to them, the way that you sit, your posture and things like that. So I would say it's a really good question, that, and I would say business dress for sure.
Excellent.
Now, if the interviewer tells you actually it's really casual, you can come in your jeans, then that's fine too. But as I mentioned, if it was me personally, I'd want to dress professionally.
Yeah, absolutely. Fab, thank you so much. Is there anything that we've not covered off that you'd made a note of, Lewis? Or have we got through everything?
Absolutely my pleasure to do this, and I've gone through everything that was on my notes, everything that I actually wanted to tell you about, to be fair.
Oh, that's fab. Well, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it. I'm sure people will find this really useful. And as I say, we might knock on your door again in the future to come and hear a little bit about your job and what you do, if that's okay.
Yeah, of course it is. Excellent. My pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
All right, can I come out of character now?